Have you ever heard of the man who chased a lion into a pit on a snowy day? Sounds like the stuff of legends, right? But this isn't fiction. It's the true story of Benaiah, one of the most intriguing and awe-inspiring figures in biblical history. His story isn't as widely known as that of David or Solomon, yet his life was filled with moments that define what it truly means to be courageous, faithful, and resilient. Benaiah wasn't just a warrior. He was a symbol of unwavering devotion, a man who stood tall when it mattered most. His journey from humble beginnings to becoming one of King David's most trusted men is a tale that still resonates today, teaching us lessons about leadership, loyalty, and unwavering courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Picture a world of ancient battles, of towering giants and mighty armies, where a single moment could turn the tide of history. Benaiah stepped into this world, not as a king, not as a prophet, but as a man driven by a deep sense of purpose. His story challenges us to ask ourselves, what does it mean to be truly brave? Is courage simply the absence of fear, or is it choosing to act in spite of it? With each challenge he faced, Benaiah's story unfolds like an epic adventure, one that resonates far beyond his time, speaking to anyone who has ever faced uncertainty or adversity. He was a man who understood that real strength isn't just physical. It's a mindset, a commitment to something greater than oneself. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you don't want to miss stories like this, ones that dig deep into history, challenge your thinking, and inspire you to face life with courage and determination. So hit that subscribe button, and let's continue unraveling the incredible life of Benaiah. Benaiah's story begins in the shadow of greatness. Born to Jehoiada, a revered priest, he was raised with a dual inheritance, spiritual wisdom and a warrior's discipline. From an early age, he learned that strength without faith was hollow, and faith without action was meaningless. He wasn't just trained in the art of war. He was molded into a man who understood the balance between the sword and the spirit. Imagine the long hours of practice, the relentless drills, the lessons passed down from his father, and the quiet moments of prayer that anchored his soul. Every scar, every lesson, every moment of hardship shaped him into the warrior he would become. It wasn't just about wielding a sword, it was about knowing when to strike and why. But Benaiah's rise to greatness wasn't an overnight success. It took years of proving himself in ways that would seem impossible to most. His legendary encounter with a lion in a snowy pit is just one of many feats that speak to his fearless spirit. Who willingly chases a lion? Most would run, freeze in fear, or try to avoid it altogether. But not Benaiah. This act alone tells us so much about his character. He didn't wait for the perfect conditions. He took action in the harshest of circumstances. And isn't that what life demands of us? To face our greatest fears head-on, even when the odds seem stacked against us. This moment was not just about survival. It was about courage in its purest form. And let's not forget the odds he overcame. Benaiah wasn't born into royalty. He didn't have a golden path laid out for him. His journey was one of sweat, grit, and relentless faith. He had to prove himself time and time again, not just with the sword, but with his character, his integrity, and his unwavering dedication to his people and his God. In a time where betrayal and political ambition ran rampant, Benaiah remained steadfast. He wasn't interested in power for the sake of power. He sought to serve, to protect, and to fulfill his calling. And perhaps that's why he earned the trust of King David himself. It's easy to see it as ancient history, but in reality, it's incredibly relevant today. We all face lions in our lives, whether it's fear, doubt, or the challenges that seem too big to conquer. The lesson from Benaiah's life is clear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action despite it. Whether you're facing obstacles in your career, relationships, or personal growth, Benaiah's story serves as a reminder that resilience, faith, and perseverance can carry us through the most challenging times. Benaiah's story begins long before the battles, before the legendary feats that would etch his name into history. His journey starts in the quiet, disciplined world of his father's house, a home where faith and duty were not just ideals, but a way of life. Born to Jehoiada, a respected priest, Benaiah grew up surrounded by the sacred traditions of Israel. From a young age, he was taught that true strength comes not from brute force, but from a deep and unwavering connection to God. It was in those humble beginnings that the seeds of greatness were sown, nurtured by discipline, faith, and an unrelenting pursuit of excellence. In the cool stillness of the early morning, Benaiah would rise with the first light, his breath visible in the dawn air as he trained with the other young men of his household. They would practice with wooden swords, their shouts echoing through the hills, their bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. His father, Jehoiada, was not just a spiritual guide, but a mentor in the ways of discipline and perseverance. A warrior's heart, he would often say, is tested long before it ever sees battle. These words would stay with Benaiah, guiding him through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. Each morning, as he swung his sword against the relentless wind, he wasn't just preparing for war, he was preparing for destiny. But Benaiah's education was not limited to physical training. He was also a student of history and scripture, learning the stories of his ancestors, the triumphs of Moses, the courage of Joshua, and the unwavering faith of Abraham. These stories were more than bedtime tales. They were lessons carved into his very soul. He understood that to lead, to fight, to protect, one must first be anchored in something greater than oneself. And so day by day, he absorbed the wisdom of the Torah, carrying it with him, not just in his mind, but in his heart. While his hands wielded weapons of war, his spirit wielded the unshakable faith that would define him in the years to come. Even as a boy, Benaiah displayed a quiet strength that set him apart from his peers. He wasn't the loudest, nor the most naturally gifted in combat, but there was something different about him. An unwavering focus, an inner fire that burned steady and strong. While others fought for recognition, Benaiah fought to improve himself, to be prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. He understood that greatness is not built in a single moment, but in the countless unseen hours of preparation. And so he trained, not for glory, but for duty. And it was this mindset that would soon place him on the path to destiny. As Benaiah grew, so did his reputation. Stories began to spread about the young man who could outlast anyone in the training fields, who never backed down from a challenge, who carried himself with a quiet confidence that spoke of a deeper strength. And then came the moment that would change everything, his first taste of real battle. The Moabites, longtime enemies of Israel, had begun their incursions, testing the borders, probing for weaknesses. It was during one such raid that Benaiah, still a young man, found himself face to face with the brutal realities of war. The battlefield was unlike anything he had imagined. The clash of swords, the cries of the wounded, the sheer chaos of combat. It was a far cry from the controlled environment of training. In those desperate moments, Benaiah came to understand the true cost of war. It was not about skill alone. It was about endurance, resilience, and the ability to push forward even when fear clawed at your soul. He fought alongside seasoned warriors, men who had seen countless battles, and yet, in the heart of the fray, Benaiah found himself rising to the occasion. He discovered that the lessons of his childhood, discipline, faith, and perseverance, were the foundation that allowed him to stand when others fell. The victory that day was not just a triumph over the Moabites. It was a turning point in Benaiah's life. He had proven himself, not just to his comrades, but to himself. From that day forward, he was no longer just the son of a priest. He was a warrior, a protector of Israel. Word of his bravery reached the ears of King David's commanders, and soon Benaiah found himself standing before the king himself, a man known for his keen ability to see potential in others. David saw something in Benaiah, something rare, a warrior with both strength and wisdom, a man who could be trusted not just with a sword, but with leadership. And so, Benaiah's journey took him from the quiet fields of his father's house to the bustling courts of King David, where he would serve among the most elite warriors in Israel. The mighty men, a group of unparalleled fighters who had proven themselves in the fires of battle. But even among these great men, Benaiah's name would soon rise above the rest. It was not just his skill with the sword that set him apart, but his unwavering sense of duty, his faith, and his unshakable loyalty to his king and his God. Life in the king's service was demanding, testing Benaiah in ways he had never imagined. He had to be more than a warrior. He had to be a leader, a tactician, and above all, a man of unwavering integrity. In the midst of political intrigue and shifting alliances, Benaiah remained steadfast. He understood that his strength came not from his sword, but from his unwavering commitment to the values instilled in him as a child, the same values that had guided him from the very beginning. As he looked back on his journey, from the quiet fields of his youth to the grand halls of the palace, Benaiah understood that every step had been preparing him for something greater. He was no longer just a warrior. He was a man of purpose, a man whose story would inspire generations to come. Benaiah's legend was not built in a single day, nor was it crafted through ordinary means. His rise to prominence was forged in the fires of relentless adversity, where every challenge he faced was a test of not just his physical might, but his unwavering spirit. Among the many exploits that would later define him, 3 particular feats stood out, each one a defining moment, an indelible mark of his courage, and a testament to the character that set him apart from even the most seasoned warriors of his time. One of the most astonishing episodes in Benaiah's life, and perhaps the one that made him a household name among the people of Israel, was the encounter with the lion. This was no ordinary lion, no fleeting shadow lurking in the distance. It was a beast of immense power and ferocity, a predator that had brought terror to an entire region. The villagers whispered of its attacks, of livestock torn apart, and of travelers who had vanished without a trace. The fear it instilled was so deep that many had abandoned their lands, choosing exile over the constant dread of an unseen threat. But Benaiah was not one to run. On a cold, snowy day when most would have sought shelter, he chose to pursue the lion. The ground was treacherous, his breath came in visible bursts, and the wind howled like a chorus of warnings. He followed the beast's tracks, each paw print a reminder of the danger he willingly faced. When he finally cornered it, the lion turned, its eyes burning with primal rage. In that moment, there was no hesitation in Benaiah. He leaped into the pit, sword in hand, and faced the beast in its lair. The battle was fierce, claws against steel, roars against battle cries. The snow turned crimson, but when it was over, only one figure emerged from the pit. Victorious. What kind of man does such a thing? It was not mere bravery. It was an embodiment of a deeper truth. Benaiah understood something that most never do. True courage isn't waiting for the right conditions. It's acting when everything seems against you. That lion wasn't just a physical enemy. It was a metaphor for the fears we all face. And in defeating it, Benaiah showed that fear is only as powerful as the limits we place upon ourselves. But his reputation didn't rest on a single act. No, Benaiah was a man who continually proved himself, over and over again. Another defining moment came when he faced an Egyptian warrior of formidable strength and size. This was no ordinary skirmish. This Egyptian was armed with a spear so massive that it was said to resemble a weaver's beam, an implement of war that could shatter bones with a single thrust. Benaiah, on the other hand, had nothing but a staff in his hands. To any observer, the outcome seemed inevitable. The odds were absurdly stacked against him. But Benaiah had learned that victory isn't always about having the superior weapon. It's about having the superior will. With calculated precision, he disarmed the giant, wresting the spear from his grip and turning the enemy's strength against him. In one swift, decisive motion, he struck down the warrior with his own weapon, leaving those who witnessed the encounter in stunned awe. Strength, Benaiah proved, is not just in the weapons we wield, but in the wisdom to use them at the right moment. These moments, while awe-inspiring, were not just displays of personal triumph. They were reflections of a deeper calling, a divine purpose that drove Benaiah forward. He knew that his strength came not from his own abilities alone, but from the unwavering trust he placed in God. Every battle he fought, every challenge he overcame, was a testimony to that faith. And it was this deep-rooted conviction that earned him a place among King David's most elite warriors, the mighty men. The mighty men were no ordinary soldiers. They were legends in their own right, a brotherhood forged through battles and bound by loyalty to their king and their God. To be counted among them was no small honor, and yet, even in this esteemed group, Benaiah stood apart. He was not content to simply be another name on a list of great men. He was determined to be a leader, a protector, and a beacon of unwavering faith. One of the most crucial aspects of Benaiah's journey was his loyalty to King David. In an era where alliances were fragile, where ambition and treachery lurked in every shadow, Benaiah remained steadfast. He understood that leadership was not just about wielding power, but about earning trust, about standing firm even when others faltered. This loyalty was tested time and again, especially during the turbulent transition of power from David to his son Solomon. As David's reign neared its end, rival factions within the kingdom sought to seize control, each vying for influence and power. One such threat came from Adonijah, David's ambitious son, who sought to claim the throne without his father's blessing. It was Benaiah who stood at the heart of this political storm, tasked with upholding the will of the king. When the order came to confront Adonijah and his allies, it was Benaiah who executed justice with a heavy but obedient heart. His role in securing Solomon's rightful place on the throne was not just an act of duty. It was a defining moment of unwavering loyalty and moral clarity. But perhaps what made Benaiah truly exceptional was not just his strength in battle or his loyalty to the throne, it was his humility. Despite his many victories, he never sought personal glory. Unlike others who were consumed by ambition, Benaiah remained grounded, always seeing himself as a servant first, serving his king, his people, and his God. He understood that true leadership was not about self-promotion, but about self-sacrifice. And in this, he became an enduring example of what it means to be both a warrior and a man of faith. His true legacy lay in the hearts of those who followed him, the soldiers who stood by his side, the people who found security under his watch, and the generations who would look back on his life as an inspiration. He was proof that greatness is not reserved for the privileged or the powerful. It is available to anyone willing to pursue it with courage, integrity, and faith. In every battle, in every decision, Benaiah left a mark that would echo through the corridors of time. His name, though often overshadowed by the likes of David and Solomon, carries within it the essence of true heroism, the kind that doesn't seek recognition, but simply seeks to do what is right. He reminds us that true greatness is not found in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments of steadfastness, in the choices we make when no one is watching, in the battles we fight, not just for ourselves, but for others. As King David's reign approached its twilight, the kingdom of Israel stood at a crossroads. The nation had flourished under David's leadership, yet tensions simmered beneath the surface. The transition of power to the next generation would not be smooth, and in these uncertain times, men like Benaiah would prove invaluable. His unwavering loyalty, forged in the fires of countless battles, was now being tested in a different kind of battlefield, one where politics, ambition, and hidden agendas wove a complex tapestry of intrigue. Benaiah, who had once chased lions and faced giants, now found himself facing a more insidious challenge, ensuring that David's chosen successor, Solomon, ascended to the throne unchallenged. Power struggles in the royal court were not fought with swords and shields, but with whispers in dark corridors and alliances forged in secrecy. The aging king, though still revered, was no longer the formidable warrior he once was. His sons, sensing opportunity, began to vie for power. Adonijah, one of David's eldest, declared himself king without his father's consent, gathering a coalition of influential supporters, including key military and priestly figures. For Benaiah, this was not just a political crisis, it was a moral one. His loyalty was not to personal ambitions, but to the will of God and the promise David had made to his son Solomon. Standing against Adonijah meant standing against some of the most powerful men in Israel, men who had once fought alongside him in battle. But loyalty, true loyalty, is not tested in the easy moments. It is revealed in the moments of conflict, when one must choose between comfort and conviction. When David, weakened but resolute, declared Solomon as his rightful heir, it fell to Benaiah to enforce that decision with swift and decisive action. He was entrusted with carrying out justice, not with the rashness of a soldier, but with the precision of a man who understood the weight of every decision. It was Benaiah who led the charge against Adonijah's rebellion, dismantling the threat with a calculated efficiency that left no room for doubt. He confronted those who stood in defiance, including the powerful Joab, David's former general and a man who had once been untouchable. Joab, realizing that his time had come, fled to the altar, seeking refuge in sacred space. But Benaiah, carrying out his duty without hesitation, executed him, ensuring that justice was served and Solomon's throne was secured. It was a somber moment, one that defined the difference between Benaiah and so many other warriors. He did not revel in the fall of his enemies. He understood that leadership often required making choices that weighed heavily on the soul. Justice, he knew, was not always clean or easy, but it was necessary for the stability of the kingdom. With the throne now secure, Benaiah was rewarded for his steadfast service. Solomon, recognizing his unwavering loyalty and wisdom, elevated him to the position of commander of the army, a role that carried immense responsibility. No longer was he just a warrior executing orders. He was now a leader, shaping the future of Israel's military strength. His leadership would require more than brute force. It demanded strategic thinking, diplomacy, and the ability to inspire a new generation of soldiers. He trained his men not just to fight, but to understand the purpose behind their service. He emphasized discipline and integrity, qualities that he believed separated warriors from mere mercenaries. Under his leadership, Israel's army became not just a force of power, but a force of principle. Beyond the battlefield, Benaiah's influence extended into the political sphere as well. Solomon, known for his wisdom, often sought his counsel on matters of security and governance. Benaiah had the unique ability to see beyond the immediate threats, understanding the broader implications of decisions made in the throne room. He became a trusted advisor, offering insights that were rooted not in personal gain, but in a genuine desire to see the kingdom prosper. However, leadership in the era of Solomon was vastly different from the time of David. The challenges were no longer external enemies alone, but internal struggles. Issues of wealth, prosperity, and the inevitable complacency that comes with success. Benaiah remained a voice of caution amidst the grandeur, reminding Solomon that strength was not measured in gold or alliances, but in the character of the people who served under him. Despite his many accolades and the honor bestowed upon him, Benaiah never lost sight of who he was. He remained humble, often found among the ranks of his men, rather than in the opulent halls of the palace. He understood that true leadership meant being present, knowing the struggles of those who served, and leading by example. This humility earned him the respect of both the nobility and the common soldier alike. Yet, even the mightiest warriors must one day lay down their swords. As Benaiah grew older, he began to reflect on his life, the battles fought, the victories won, and the lessons learned. He understood that legacy is not merely about the monuments built in one's name, but in the lives touched, the wisdom passed down, and the values upheld long after one's time has passed. In his later years, Benaiah took on a more advisory role, mentoring younger warriors and leaders, instilling in them the same principles that had guided him throughout his life. He often spoke of the lion in the pit, not as a tale of personal glory, but as a lesson in facing fears head-on. He would remind them that courage is not about seeking danger, but about standing firm when it finds you. His journey was not just one of battles and victories, but of unwavering faith and an unshakable commitment to doing what was right. Benaiah's transition into the role of commander of Solomon's army was not just a shift in title, it was a profound transformation of purpose. The warrior who once fought on the front lines, sword in hand, now bore the weight of an entire nation's security on his shoulders. Leadership at this level was not just about military might. It was about wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond the immediate threats to the long-term stability of the kingdom. Solomon's reign marked a time of unprecedented peace and prosperity, but beneath the surface, the challenges were far from over. The enemies of Israel did not disappear. They simply grew more subtle, more patient, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness. Benaiah knew this better than anyone. He understood that prosperity could breed complacency, and complacency was a kingdom's greatest vulnerability. With wealth flowing into Israel like never before, and alliances stretching far beyond its borders, the threats to the nation had evolved. The battlefield was no longer just a place of swords and shields. It was now found in diplomatic meetings, trade negotiations, and the intricate web of political alliances. Benaiah, ever the vigilant protector, made it his mission to ensure that Israel's strength remained unshaken, even in times of peace. But leading in Solomon's kingdom was unlike anything he had ever known. Unlike David, a warrior king who understood the battlefield as well as any soldier, Solomon ruled from a place of wisdom and diplomacy. While this approach brought great advancements, it also required Benaiah to adapt. No longer was brute force the primary tool. Now, strategy and foresight were the key weapons. He surrounded himself with advisors, studied foreign tactics, and sought to understand the motivations of Israel's neighboring nations. To protect the kingdom, he had to know it inside and out, its weaknesses, its strengths, and most importantly, its people. Benaiah believed that a leader should never become disconnected from those he serves. He often walked through the streets of Jerusalem, speaking with merchants, listening to the concerns of farmers, and observing the daily lives of the people. He knew that true security wasn't just about guarding the city walls. It was about ensuring that the people within them felt safe and valued. This approach earned him immense respect, not just as a military leader, but as a protector of the people. Yet, despite his wisdom and vigilance, Benaiah was not without his challenges. The rise of Solomon's grand projects, the construction of the temple, the expansion of trade routes, and the forging of international alliances brought new internal pressures. There were those who saw these developments as an opportunity to amass power for themselves, and Benaiah found himself facing enemies not on the battlefield, but within the very heart of the kingdom. Corruption and greed crept in subtly, weaving their way through the palace corridors. Some officials grew more concerned with their personal gain than with the welfare of the nation. Benaiah, with his unyielding sense of duty, refused to turn a blind eye. He confronted these issues head-on, knowing that his unwavering commitment to justice would not always make him popular. But he did not serve for the approval of men. He served for the good of Israel. He understood that leadership required standing firm, even when it meant standing alone. It was this unwavering integrity that made him not just a soldier, but a true guardian of the nation's soul. One of the most defining moments of Benaiah's leadership came during a period of internal unrest. A faction within the kingdom, discontent with Solomon's policies, sought to stir rebellion. They whispered in the streets, sowing seeds of doubt, questioning the king's wisdom, and stirring old allegiances to David's former rivals. It was a delicate situation, one that required not just military strength, but diplomacy and restraint. Benaiah, with his years of experience, knew that crushing dissent with force alone would only fuel further division. Instead, he sought to understand the root causes, addressing grievances, and seeking unity through dialogue. But when diplomacy failed, he acted with the precision of a seasoned warrior, swiftly and decisively putting an end to the threat before it could consume the kingdom. Through it all, Benaiah remained a steadfast presence in Solomon's court. He was not one to seek the limelight, nor did he hunger for recognition. His satisfaction came from knowing that his service, his sacrifices, were contributing to something far greater than himself. He often reflected on his younger days, those grueling training sessions under his father's watchful eye, the lion in the pit, the countless battles that had forged him into the man he had become. And in those quiet moments of reflection, he realized that every hardship, every challenge had prepared him for this very role. As the kingdom reached its zenith, Benaiah began to consider his own legacy. He knew that his time as a warrior would one day come to an end, and he wanted to ensure that the next generation of leaders was prepared to take up the mantle. He spent more time mentoring young commanders, instilling in them the values that had guided him: courage, integrity, and an unshakable faith in God. He emphasized that leadership was not about wielding power, but about serving with humility and purpose. Despite his many accomplishments, Benaiah remained deeply humble. He never saw himself as above others. He saw himself as a servant, called to a higher purpose. Even in his old age, when his hands no longer wielded a sword with the same strength, his wisdom and experience were sharper than ever. And so he continued to serve, not out of obligation, but out of a deep, abiding love for his people and his God. As the years passed and Solomon's reign flourished, Benaiah's role evolved from that of a warrior to a statesman, an elder whose wisdom was sought by many. His hands, once calloused from battle, now carried the weight of decisions that could shape the destiny of a nation. But even as he aged, the fire within him never dimmed. He remained steadfast, always watching, always ready. His presence in the royal court was a silent reminder that true strength is not measured in victories alone, but in the consistency of character and the depth of conviction. Despite the peace that Solomon's wisdom brought to Israel, Benaiah knew better than to let his guard down. He understood human nature, how easily prosperity could breed complacency, and how the whispers of discontent could spread like wildfire if left unchecked. Though the kingdom stood as a beacon of power and influence, external threats were never far, and internal strife still lurked beneath the surface. Benaiah had seen enough in his lifetime to know that every era of peace carries within it the seeds of future conflict. He spent his days mentoring the next generation of leaders, warriors who had never known the trials of war firsthand. To them, battle was a distant echo, a story told by old men in the twilight of their lives. But Benaiah would not allow them to grow soft. He shared his experiences with a solemn intensity, reminding them that the challenges of leadership often arise not on the battlefield, but in the choices made in moments of quiet. True strength, he would say, is not found in the sword, but in the discipline to know when it must be used. Though he no longer led armies into battle, his influence was woven into the very fabric of the kingdom. Solomon often turned to him for counsel, valuing the perspective of a man who had seen both war and peace and understood the delicate balance between the two. Benaiah's insights were not just practical, they were deeply rooted in faith and experience. He reminded Solomon that wisdom without vigilance could lead to downfall, and that even the wisest ruler needed the counsel of those who had weathered life's harshest storms. But Benaiah's service was not without personal cost. He had lost friends, comrades, and even parts of himself along the way. The weight of his experiences bore down on him in quiet moments, when the halls of the palace fell silent and memories of fallen brothers haunted his thoughts. Leadership, he had come to understand, was a burden that required sacrifice. And yet, despite the heavy toll, he remained unwavering in his dedication, knowing that his purpose was far greater than his personal pain. As time wore on, Benaiah's body grew weary, but his spirit remained unbreakable. He took solace in the knowledge that he had lived with honor, serving not for glory, but for a greater cause. And though his steps were slower, his gaze was still sharp, his mind still vigilant. He knew the end of his journey was approaching, but he faced it with the same courage that had defined him in his youth. To him, death was not something to be feared. It was simply the next chapter, a transition into the hands of the God he had served so faithfully. His final days were spent imparting his wisdom to those willing to listen. Young warriors gathered at his feet, eager to hear his stories, to learn from a man who had faced lions, giants, and kings with the same unwavering faith. And Benaiah, ever humble, would remind them that courage is not about seeking out battles, but about standing firm when they come to you. His legacy was not written in monuments or statues, but in the hearts of those who followed his example. As Benaiah neared the end of his life, he reflected not on the battles won or the titles earned, but on the lives he had touched and the lessons he had passed down. He understood that true greatness is not measured by how long one stands in the fight, but by the impact left behind. And though his time in this world was drawing to a close, his influence would endure far beyond his years. Benaiah's life was more than a series of heroic acts and battlefield victories. It was a testament to unwavering faith, unyielding courage, and a deep commitment to duty. He was not born into privilege or power, yet through discipline, integrity, and relentless perseverance, he rose to stand among the greatest men of his time. His story reminds us that true greatness is not found in fame or fortune, but in the quiet moments of steadfastness, in the choices we make when no one is watching, and in the conviction to stay true to our principles even when the world pressures us to waver. Benaiah's journey shows us that character, not circumstance, is what shapes a person into a true leader. His life was a reflection of what it means to serve selflessly, whether it was protecting his king, leading his fellow warriors, or offering counsel in the halls of power. Benaiah never sought recognition. Instead, he devoted himself to a purpose greater than personal ambition. His unwavering commitment to justice and loyalty to his leaders and people serve as a beacon of inspiration for us all. He understood that strength is not just the ability to overcome an enemy, but the discipline to remain steadfast in one's values, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. In an era filled with uncertainty and shifting allegiances, Benaiah stood firm, proving that true leaders are not driven by power, but by purpose. As we reflect on Benaiah's journey, we see a man who carried the weight of responsibility with humility, who faced fear without hesitation, and who remained faithful to his calling until his final breath. His legacy endures not because of the enemies he defeated, but because of the values he embodied: loyalty, honor, and an unshakable trust in God. Benaiah teaches us that the real battles of life are often fought within, in the moments where we must choose between what is easy and what is right. He stands as a reminder that true strength is not about dominance, but about serving with integrity and conviction. Before we wrap up, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Stories like Benaiah's are more than just history. They are timeless lessons that can inspire and equip us to face our own challenges with courage and determination. Whether it's overcoming obstacles, standing firm in our values, or striving for greatness in our own unique way, there's so much we can learn from figures like Benaiah. So if you found value in this story, hit that subscribe button and stay with us as we continue to explore the lives of remarkable figures who shaped history with their faith and character. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. Benaiah's life may have come to an end, but his legacy lives on in every person who chooses to stand firm in the face of fear, who leads with integrity, and who serves with a heart devoted to something greater than themselves. His story is not just one of the past. It is a call to all of us today. Whether we are leaders, warriors, or ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, we can all draw strength from his example. He teaches us that no battle is too great when faced with faith and determination, and that true success lies in living a life of honor, courage, and unwavering commitment to what is right. As we close this chapter on Benaiah's journey, let us carry his lessons forward into our own lives. May we all take inspiration from his unwavering devotion, his fearless pursuit of justice, and his steadfast faith. In the end, the true measure of a life well lived is not found in the accolades we receive, but in the impact we leave behind in the hearts of those we serve. Thank you, and see you in my next video. God bless you.